what I'm going to start from, as Chandy said, is where do you get this XML from? When do you get it? Where do you get it? So just a few quotes here from a report on journal publishing in this case, but similar considerations apply in the standards world. Journal publishers were facing long delays between manuscript preparation and production in print. Typesetting and proofreading cost 5 to 10 times as much for technical material as they do for novels, trade publications. This perhaps states that the American Chemical Society reported per-page costs on some journals of more than $30, and attempts have been made to cut time and money by using less expensive equipment or less experienced personnel. And those quotes came from this document, which, whether you can see that down there, published on 15th of January 1960. So, plus ça change, plus la même chose. The more things change, the more they stay the same. These same considerations really apply today. So in 1960, this was our starting point, typewriter, sheet of paper. And this is the kind of thing you were churning out. This is from one of Einstein's 1905 papers, I think, with the equations written by hand. So now, for the sake of argument, let's say our starting point is Microsoft Word. Yes, other word processors are available, other authoring platforms are available. But the end point essentially is the same, it's publication. That's what we're aiming towards. In 1960, that meant print publication, a sheet of paper bound into a document of some sort. Whereas, as we've already heard from Todd, 2019, we're talking about multi-format publication. We're talking about PDF still, yes, people do still like PDFs. HTML, EPUB, Kindle and other kinds of readers like that, DAISY for accessibility, visually impaired, for e-readers and so on. And yeah, maybe you're still printing on sheets of actual chewed up wood. So these new readers and new formats bring new features and they have new requirements. You need reflowable text. If you're reading it on your cell phone, if you're reading it on your laptop, you need different views. And you need rich hyperlinking. You want to go out to some standard that's mentioned in the text, you need to find that document. You need to be able to dynamically update the content. So when there's a revision of some sort or correction, you need to be able to dynamically update the content. And as I mentioned already, you need accessibility. There's a lot of infrastructure there in order to make that document accessible to, for example, for visually impaired readers. And yeah, as Todd again mentioned, reading a PDF on some kind of touchscreen is so 2010. It's not good enough anymore. You have to be doing more. So, how do we get from DOCX, say, for sake of argument, to published? We get to PDF, to get to EPUB, HTML, Kindle. Word can't really do this on its own. And this is where XML comes in, as Todd kind of outlined at the beginning today. XML is this foundation, this hub for your single source publishing. Get to XML and everything comes from there. So before I go on, I'm going to set out some propositions, and you can argue with some or all of these, but this is where I'm going to start from. First proposition, DOCX or its successor formats. It's not going away. It's still the medium of choice in a lot of cases. You might say, well, DOCX is XML. Yeah. If anyone's ever looked at what the XML looks like in a Word file, you wouldn't sleep at night. Yes, it's XML, but it's not meaningful in any way. It's XML in order to present a Word document. So it's all centered around format, and it's not really semantic information in there. Third proposition is that if you're going to do high-quality, multi-format publication, you're going to need semantically meaningful XML, not just presentational. We have to know what each of these bits of the document actually is. And proposition 4, various types of artificial intelligence, for want of a better phrase, is starting to automate this Word to XML conversion in some areas. So, this is the fundamental. XML doesn't just happen. You don't flick a switch one day and suddenly you've got XML. XML requires new publication workflows, production, possibly also editorial. You're going to need new software tools. You're going to need to train your people to do it. Above all of these, it requires deliberate, thoughtful choices. Now, in the standards world, fortunately, a lot of those thoughtful choices have already been made by the NISO working group and so on through STS. A lot of that grunt work has already been done. So the rewards, once you can get this semantically meaningful XML, are large. So a different example from the ISO online browsing platform. This is a slightly out-of-date view of WHO, the World Health Organization's bulletin landing page. And you can see, although they don't publish all of these formats now, but at this point they were publishing the articles in HTML, as PDF, as DAISY for e-readers, as EPUB, and as in Kindle format. And all of that coming from a single source XML file of the document. So whatever format you need, you've got it here. And the benefits of XML for that organization is allowing them to do this multi-format, multi-channel publication, speeding up publication times. We were involved with them when the Zika virus crisis hit in 2016, and they wanted to get that content out as quickly as possible. With the workflow that we had set up with them, they were able to get articles about Zika published within hours of receipt and properly typeset, looking like proper articles within hours. And they're able to publish more content with the same number of staff, so they didn't need to bring in extra people to do any of this. Also meant they could disseminate their content more widely. You may recognize some or all of these outlets: PMC, PubMed Central, Cielo is a Brazilian online publication platform, Crossref, obviously we know about the home of DOIs and so on. And it enables them to do wider language support as well. They can support the 6 UN languages, again, coming out of a single source by having abstracts in the different languages and so on, and keywords in the different languages, but all in the same document. So then you come to this is the key decision here really, is where in the workflow are you going to do this? Where are you going to go from this unstructured, semantically unstructured document that you've received and convert that into XML somehow? And there are really broadly 4 different places you can do this. We can talk about XML authoring. So right up front, the document itself is originally natively written in XML. You can convert to XML before, essentially when it comes through your door and drops on your desk, before editing. Or you can convert to XML before composition. And finally, you can go the whole way through your existing publication process and convert to XML at the end, basically generate an XML file from your published document. I'll go through each of these stages. Each of them has pros and cons. There's no one silver bullet, perfect solution for everyone. So the original XML Dream, I know still harbored in some quarters, is that committees or your content generators are doing that in XML, a semantically correct XML file. So that's created by the person who knows what the content is and what it means. And then your editors, your editorial production teams then edit that XML that's been supplied to you. And then you use that XML file as your point of single source publication, be it to print, be it to ebook formats, other derivative products. And sadly, this is the author reality. Most of your content generators are going to do that in Microsoft Word or similar. They're not thinking about structure. They might think about how the document's laid out, but they're not really thinking about what each piece of that document actually means semantically. And they don't like doing production work for you. Committees are brilliant subject matter experts, but you can't really train them, you can't really control them. They are outside your control. And one thing we hear and come across ourselves is that macros and kind of essentially programs that you can write yourselves to whip the content into shape, they rarely solve the problem. Macros can be helpful, don't get me wrong. I know a lot of editorial offices, production offices that use a lot of macros, but they're hard to write if you don't have the right people. As I've said, your content creators are very smart people. They can often outsmart your idiot-proof macros and do things the wrong way. Your macros, because of this, they grow ever larger, more complex to cover all these holes that your authors are discovering in them. Your larger macros are getting more training for your staff to know how to use them, and then the person who wrote them goes and gets another job. We've heard all these stories. And then, of course, Word itself changes. new versions of Word. Some things work differently, some things don't work at all. And increasingly, IT kind of security environments are making macros much harder to implement. Online XML authoring is something, again, which we hear about, heard about people like Overleaf and so on. Maybe this is the wave of the future. It gives you a sort of HTML-like experience. Looks like you're writing a web page as you go. Underneath, it's XML. There are still issues here. These systems can be broken, just like Word documents can. People can put things in the wrong place, apply the wrong style, fill in the wrong field on the form. And they require online access. So, for example, I flew out here from the UK on Monday, did some work on the flight. You can't do that because you can't get access to your online tool. Maybe you can pull a copy of the file down, work on it offline, post it back up. There are ways around it. And math, particularly, if you're working in math-heavy content, a lot of these math editors are relatively immature and unsophisticated. And finally, yes, it might be XML, but is that XML actually correct? It might be valid, but is it what it says it is? So the third method we could look at is post-publication XML, and this is certainly still quite common in the journal world. A lot of people doing this, but so the committee submits their draft standard in Word, you edit it in Word, you typeset it either in Word. We were talking about hearing from Todd. I did see a few sheepish hands about people who publish from Word to PDF. So you get it looking right in the Word file. Or you use something a little bit more sophisticated in design, FrameMaker, things like that. But bearing in mind, of course, that you've then got to get back to Word from those formats. You proof the typeset file, typeset your corrections, publish that in print, create your PDF, and then at that stage, then you create your XML and your other derivative formats, EPUB and so on. But to get the file back to the committees for another revision, you've got to get back a Word file that represents this thing that you've published. So the advantage is there. There's no workflow changes essentially for you. Your procedures stay the same, but crucially, the XML now has been generated after you publish the document. So the quality of that XML essentially is unknown. You've got extra production time and costs because this all happens after you've done what you would normally be doing. And with the best will in the world, there are going to be errors in that XML that gets created. So it's not really integrated, it's not all happening with the same team, it's not all under the same roof. It's almost essential to outsource this process. But unfortunately, you can't really outsource your quality control. It's just not practical to have someone else do that. And as I had to get Bruce to remind me what this little cartoon was about. It's like putting a dinosaur behind the wheel of a car. It's not really, it's kind of two completely different ways of working, ways of thinking, kind of shoehorned together. You've got to manage then your vendors, and I'm sure some of you already deal with some of your processes being outsourced. So you've got to develop markup standards that you tell your vendor what they need, what to generate from what you've published. You've got to test vendors, you've got to compare what they generate with what vendor B generates. Can they tag to the same standard? And you've still got to select on quality, not cost. You've got to give the vendor QA tools so they can check themselves that they're generating sufficiently clean XML for you. And there's an ongoing process where you have to keep validating what they're doing. Otherwise, what you'll find is when they were bidding for the work, they put the A team on it, you get this great XML back. A few months down the line, maybe the B team's doing it now, or the C team, and what you're getting back from them is maybe not as good if you don't keep an eye on it. And I put this laughing horse, I'm sure some of you already know the laughing horse story from Laurent Galichet, who used to be at ISO. We'll have the slides available and look up this story, but essentially it's about what happens if you don't keep your vendor up to scratch with quality and what can slip through. So, sorry, that was the second option. Third option, XML-First. So, again, when I first kind of moved into digital publication, XML-based publication, this was, I suppose, seen as the way forward. So your committees are still working in Word. they're sending you a Word file, and the first thing you do when it comes through the door is convert it to XML. And then you do all your editing in XML. You typeset from that XML. Again, you check the typeset quality, you update, correct the XML, and from that XML file, you create your final PDFs, your EPUBs, and so on. And then for a next revision, you convert that XML file back into a Word file and go again. So in terms of pros here, you're only converting the file once. When it drops through your door, essentially converting it to an XML file. So all the way through the editing, you can validate it against the DTD or schema, so you can make sure the XML is still valid even when somebody's been editing the text, moving things around, adding new sections and so on. But on the con side, it does require some kind of XML editing environment for your staff. Training them can be expensive depending on the application you're using and what you're expecting from them. And an issue here, essentially, you can't really then practically use freelancers. It's much more difficult to use freelance editors if they've got a very bespoke software environment that they have to work in. And your editors are working inside the angle brackets, and not everybody's comfortable doing that. Or if you want some kind of WYSIWYG environment where they don't know they're working inside the XML brackets, then you're spending money on some kind of editorial environment that can render the XML for you in an editing environment, so you're spending money there. So the last option is what we like to call the XML middle workflow. So again, your committee's still working in the environment they're used to, they're working in Word. When the document comes into you, you're cleaning it up. You're cleaning up that draft, and you're basically styling the paragraphs, essentially. You are putting the semantic structure in there. You are saying, these are normative references, this is terms and definitions, and so on. You're editing internally in Microsoft Word as now, and then at some point you convert, once editing is completed, you convert that Word file to XML. Then you're using that XML to typeset. You're proofing the PDF, which essentially feeds back into corrections in the XML. And then the key thing here is you actually correct the Word file. So if there are errors in the PDF, you're going back to the Word file, correcting the Word file, generating the XML again, and going again. So in this workflow, your Word file remains your document of record, your key document. And from that final XML, then that's where you're generating your PDFs, your EPUBs, and so on. And you've still got that Word file that you've been working on to send that back to the committees for the next round of revision. So, advantages and disadvantages. An obvious pro is that your editors, your staff internally are still working in Microsoft Word as they have been. Therefore, your training costs, they're not going to be zero, but they're going to be lower than if you've got to train them to use some kind of XML editor. You can still use freelance editors. You can send a Word file to them just as easily as you could before. But you're enforcing structure before you get to the final pages. So as I say, you're delineating these different sections. And you don't have to proof the XML because you're using the XML coming from Word to generate the PDF, you're proofing the PDF, and you're correcting the Word file. The disadvantage is that, as I said, XML doesn't just happen. You then have to use some kind of application to get you from Word to XML. And Bruce said we were allowed one plug. So a way you can do that is with the Xstyle software, which Inera produces, which is one way of going from Word to XML. And then obviously Typefi gets you the rest of the way from XML to your PDF. So where should you go next? And I think there are key discussions that you need to have. What are your business goals? And I think it is critical that business decisions, business requirements should drive your technical decisions and not the other way around. So don't go for any particular XML workflow because it's XML and everyone's doing it. Evaluate what your business needs are, and based on those, that's how you make your technical decisions on your workflows. Find out more about XML. Mulberry, we have them here, fantastic resource to tell you everything you need to know about XML. Look up the NISO project, and as Todd mentioned, there are lots of documentation there as well to tell you a lot of what you need to know about NISO STS. And talk to people who are doing it already. Todd put up a slide of those who are already down this NISO STS workflow or ISO STS workflows. Talk to those people, quite a lot of them in this room here. Bring someone in, bring a consultant in who knows XML, who knows standards publishing. don't reinvent the wheel, as Todd mentioned. Don't spend hundreds of thousands building something yourself if it's already there. So just to kind of wrap up, XML is the key to this multi-format publishing world. But you can't realistically, in most situations, rely on your committees, your content generators to give you semantically meaningful XML. It won't happen. People have tried it. There are lots of XML workflow options. None of them is perfect for every user. You'll have to look at your own requirements, your own workflows, and decide which one is the best. In our opinion, the XML middle option gives you a good balance, the best balance in terms of time to publication, in terms of how you do quality control, and in terms of controlling your overall costs. And that's really all I have. These are the details for Inera. If you want to talk to us about our solutions for getting from Word to XML.